Welcome to the Beyond Anxiety podcast, where we talk about dismantling mental health stigmas, mental health awareness through education, and strategies for overcoming mental health challenges. I'm your host, Darius Fennell, and I'm a mental health and therapy advocate, published author, speaker, and coach. I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm so excited to get into this next episode. So if you're ready, let's go. What is going on, Hope Champions? Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Anxiety podcast. This is season 1, episode 5. First and foremost, it is May. That means it is Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm going to be doing some daily posts around various topics, addressing mental health awareness, stigmas. I'm also going to be doing a webinar this month. Really excited about that. I've just been featured in the Black Speakers Network podcast page, so you can catch me there. And I will be doing giveaways and special sales on my book and book bundles. So stay tuned as I make announcements for that. Now back into the episode. Today's title is Lonely versus Alone, Reframing Solitude and Anxiety Recovery. This topic, I feel like I say this every episode, this is near and dear to my heart. But when it comes to recovery, it can feel like a very lonely time, a very lonely process. So various number of things that you feel, and we're going to get into all that stuff during the episode. But some of the key points that I want to make here is that in the midst of feeling lonely and alone, core things remain true. All feelings are valid. I'm going to say it again. All feelings are valid. Feelings are neither good nor evil. Feelings are essentially messengers. Now, I will say this. Not all feelings are accurate, but they are trying to point you to something that either trying to get your attention about or something you've been ignoring, which is likely some deeper rooted issue, right? What are the messages? No idea. This varies per person. And I'm going to stress this over and over every podcast and every chance I get, is that this is where therapy is highly useful. Because you have to get beyond, not just beyond anxiety, but you have to get beyond the feeling in and of itself. It's not the whole story, right? When I was deeply in the throes of anxiety back in 2018, debilitating anxiety, panic disorder, depression, all that good stuff, right? Those were the official diagnoses among other things, right? But loneliness at that time felt like an all-time high. And, sometimes we do use the terms alone and lonely synonymously, right? How would we find loneliness? Loneliness is a perception, mental and emotional state of isolation, right? Being alone, however, is more of a physical state of being by yourself. And these terms have been used synonymously, but many times incorrectly, because they're not the same thing. And not to say that they're mutually exclusive, but if we want to give an official definition for those, they're not the same thing. And so for me, loneliness, which again is mostly based on like a subjective perception of things, I had a lot of physical symptoms. Insomnia, palpitations, dissociation, ruminating thoughts, catastrophic thoughts, GERD reflux, dizziness, tight chest, tight throat, fatigue, apathy, muscle tightness, pain, headaches, medicine side effects for things I was taking at the time, and feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. right? Just not a fun place to be. Like, and all these things were happening simultaneously. I don't mean like one day I had this, another day I had that. No, these were all happening at the same time. It really, really felt like a lonely time. And, physically I was isolated because I had agoraphobia, which in essence is, the fear of, not just the fear of like crowded places or leaving your house, but the real fear is that you're going to have an anxiety attack or a panic attack in public and you're not going to be able to handle it. Right. So really it's kind of one of those things of anxiety about anxiety, anticipating that something bad is going to happen to the point where you don't even want to go anywhere, be around anyone else or somewhere out in public. So honestly, I just didn't know how I was going to get through any of that. And I was reluctant to share what I was dealing with. And at the time, like, who would really hear what I have to say? And there's another part where you feel like a burden trying to explain all this stuff to folks. So it's like, figure it out. And, the more time goes on, the more you kind of spiral into more and more loneliness because it's not getting better. And for me, it wasn't getting better. And so time really seemed to kind of stand still. When you don't really have like a feeling of duration or having an end in sight, time is just, it's not even a thing anymore. It just feels like you are existing somewhere in a void, in a vacuum that you will never get out of. And what really made the difference for me, say it again, is going to therapy. And that's where I was able to learn that loneliness is very, very subjective, right? And that there were many people experiencing the same symptoms as me. And I really started to find out that more and more as I began to share, began to be vulnerable. And there was one time where I shared, took me a while to share online because I was like, yeah, it's kind of private, it's kind of personal, and I don't want the world to see that yet. That was back in like still 2018, 2019. And I didn't feel like I was really far enough along to talk about it, which really was not true. Like there's no really bad time to talk about, your issues as long as you're in a trusted environment where you can do so. But I found out there are many people feeling the same way. There are many people who were getting help. There are many people who were recovering. There are many people who have recovered. And as I started to kind of speak out more and, the algorithm will line you up with people who, whatever you're constantly viewing, they send you more and more stuff. So the more I kept reading about anxiety and looking at posts about anxiety and mental health, I started running into other people who either were exactly where I was or they'd been where I am and they'd found success. So obviously you want to say, hey, how did you get to where you are now? This thing feels impossible. But therapy was the main place where I was able to explore all that stuff, right? And being vulnerable allowed me to have an openness to different perspectives, healthy coping strategies, really getting to the root and doing the work, but under the care of a licensed professional. So, I learned to embrace all the parts of me, all the experiences, all the feelings, without judging them, without having shame, without trying to define meaning, right? Sometimes one of the first things that you need to do is learn how to sit with whatever you're feeling, right? And there are certain things that you will learn in the midst of that, because if you're quiet enough, you'll begin to hear your mind talking. And I think that's the biggest problem we have today is there's so many distractions. It's the internet, it's the social media, it's the 9 to 5, it's you got to take the kids here, you got to pay the bills, you have all these different organizational things that you're involved in, got to go work out, got to, take the kids to this and whatever else is going on that's really making things, preoccupying yourself with the inability to hear yourself think and to know what you're really dealing with, right? And so the truth is you do actually need that physical isolation time. And this is something that my second therapist had shared with me, is that many parts of this healing journey and the things that you have to deal with, you have to do it by yourself. Number one, not everyone is prepared to do the same work. Not everyone is equipped professionally and, skill-wise and wisdom enough to tell you the right things. And so in order to get that real healing, the real recovery, you have to become a student of yourself. And many occasions, that will be by yourself, but under the care of a licensed professional. So I'm going to stress that again and again. So being alone, physically alone, is actually, we're going to reframe that and say, and not to say you completely keep yourself isolated, but for the real hard work that you have to do, some things you're going to have to do by yourself, right? Like right now I'm in physical therapy, and, once I was kind of taught all the different stretches and, exercise I needed to do, wasn't really much that I needed at that point in terms of being supervised, right? Other than providing the feedback that, okay, now that you've done that exercise, are you feeling any pain? Are you feeling, better range of motion? Are you able to lift certain things? All that stuff kind of ties into the feedback part, but the work, it's you and the yoga ball. It's you and the 1 pound weight. It's you and the cane, and you're lifting and twirling it all different types of ways, so that you get your range of motion back, your flexibility, and your strength. You have to do the work. And it's not comfortable. There are parts of it that are soothing, like when you are able to, get a lot more room to move, and different massages that can kind of help bring, relief where your muscles aren't as tight. But for the most part, everything else, it sucks. But in that discomfort, there's a lot of things that are happening. A lot of things are happening, right? Most of the discomfort that you feel relative to the mental health recovery is dealing with the unfamiliar, right? And you can know the truth all you want. You can know the right things. You can store that in your brain, but until it becomes a reality of truth for you and governs how you live your life, how you behave, and how you think, it's just information in your brain. And it's just like anything else. Like some of these exercises I've had to do for physical therapy, not familiar motions, and don't feel good. And I want to distinguish between discomfort, not feeling good, and like actual pain, right? If something is really, really painful, it's usually an indication that damage is happening. And so you need to stop. And that's one of the things you give for the feedback, at least in a physical sense. But the same thing with your therapist. Hey, I want you to try some coping strategies, or even like breathing, breath work, stuff like that. Not all of those worked very well for me. And I gave feedback and say, I don't like this one. Okay, you don't have to throw all of breath work away, but there are many different types. 3x3x3, box breathing, 4-7-8, 7-11, take your pick. Or sometimes just breathe normal and sit in the silence and listen to your breath. Sometimes that's all you need. But while becoming a student of yourself, right, you're understanding your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, your symptoms, right, and no longer having busyness as an excuse to not have the awareness. Right. And this is where journaling comes in. Write all this stuff down so that you can understand patterns And talk to your therapist about those patterns and understand, when am I being triggered? When am I feeling tired? When do I feel anxious? When do I feel angry? Something is behind all that stuff. And then the subconscious mind is programming. And just like a real computer, whatever is written there in the code is what's going to run. Right? If you remember the Windows computers, you go to the task manager, you see all those executables and programs just running, taking up memory, taking up CPU cycles. Now, one of the funny parts is it may not be on the desktop or an app that you have open, but it is running. And if that is the case, that means it's influencing the rest of the system. Whether you see it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not. It's there, it's running, and it has to be dealt with, or it's going to continue to do what it was designed to do until you stop it. Right? So pausing into the nothingness, allowing the nervous system to be familiar and comfortable with doing nothing. Right? Which means you got to be ready to hear what the subconscious mind is thinking about. Your fears, your shames, the things that make you cry, things that make you angry. Right? And it's easy to run away from those until they become overwhelming, and the compound effect of not dealing with them starts to affect the nervous system. And now you got a serious problem. Right? So meditation, walking, sitting with discomfort, the thoughts and the feelings, all those are done alone. Not indefinitely, but there's things that you have to do by yourself in order to recover. Right? Now, can you go to different community groups? Absolutely. Right? But the real work that has to be done is on your own, under the guidance of a therapist. Right? So just to recap our talk today. Right? We talked about lonely, which is based on perception. It's subjective, but it is a messenger, and it can be leveraged in therapy if it's used properly. How? To get to the deep roots. And once you understand what you're dealing with, now you can do the work. Right? Alone is more of a physical and a choice, but also needed for healing. Therapy is essential for dealing with loneliness and learning to leverage the necessary vital times of being alone. Right? So several calls to action here. If you are in that place where you feel lonely, right, in combination with anxiety symptoms that are debilitating, that are overwhelming, and you feel like there is no end in sight, I invite you to take the call to action to consider going to therapy. It doesn't mean that you're weak, that you're crazy, or you're lazy. It just means that you need help. And that is one of my biggest regrets in life, is that I allow those stigmas to delay all the time that I could have been getting the help, and I didn't. And my symptoms did not get better. I couldn't sleep it away. I couldn't busy it away. I couldn't accomplish it away. It was always there, getting darker, getting worse, affecting my quality of life. And I realized at some point, I got to go and get help. Secondly, I have my books, Leaving Jupiter, Navigating Your Anxiety Recovery, and the Leaving Jupiter Daily Journal. One is a guide for awareness, equipping, and execution, and also to help you develop your anxiety toolkit. Right? For the journal, practical spaces to capture thoughts, successes, affirmations, visions, and all types of stuff that you can use. Take it with you to your therapy session. Take it with you to your primary care physician. Because they're going to ask, what brings you in? What are you experiencing? And if you're like me, I don't have a photographic memory. I can't remember all that stuff. And how many times have I gone in and they ask me that and I leave something off? Something important, right? So write it down. Talk about it. Deal with it. Do the work and take the journey. Right? Once again, I am Darius Fennell from Beyond Anxiety. This is the Beyond Anxiety podcast. all these things, I'm telling you to find your recovery path. All right, Hope Champions. Until next time, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next episode.